All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue digesting this debate.
The wrong thoughts.
Yes, I know that communism falls far short, but I'm saying that every instance of the use of law is to bring order and banish the use of physical force in daily life. I mean, look at China. China's a communist dictatorship where they
I overspoke a little. Not every instance of the use of law.
banish the use of physical force in daily life, except for people who are allowed to use force in daily life, right? The government or whatever, you know? But that's what the system of law is for, is to stop people from using force in daily life.
No, actually, that is not the case.
All the way back to ancient Babylon, when they did court cases against people for borrowing a ladder and bringing it back broken, they wouldn't go beat the guy up, they would go to court. It's taking physical force out of our daily lives and putting it up to some authority.
Comment. Okay, guys, let's just all imitate the U.S. Constitution and we'll be good. Case closed. Please. Please. Would every society in the world please just adopt the U.S. Constitution? Please, for my birthday, please.
No, because that's the contradiction. That is because they initiate force for the supposed social utility of preventing force. You don't have a problem with that? No government has ever been established by cooperation and by mutual consent of the people that would populate, of the populace that would have share any geographical slice.
Now, are you talking about the nature of government in principle, or are you just talking about the governments that you have seen that have occurred? I mean,
No.
if the nature of government in principle doesn't offend you, then why are you offended by the nature of government in principle?
If the nature of government in principle is just to stop people from using force against each other, right? If that's just the basic thing, what offends you about it, right? He's offended about forced taxation ultimately. Yeah.
I do think that there has to be third-party arbiters, and there has to be laws against actual physical force. And this is where I agree with the objectivist model that the only way that you can violate rights is through the use of physical force. Physical force is not to be defined by the candy clerk who tries to upsell you from a small Coke to a large.
Now, I just want to do some of the comments over here. There is laws protect those utilizing force. This is the anarchist worldview. Laws protect those who use force. Laws protect the government. We are just the victims, right? Now that's certainly true in Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany. Certainly true, okay? But is it the case in the United States? Canada probably, yes. Is it the case in the United States? Laws protect those who utilize force. Well, what do you mean utilize? In America, we go about our daily lives without anybody using physical force at all. If anybody uses physical force against us, it's because we broke the law. And one of the laws is we have to pay for our share of the government, right? They divide it up among every citizen, and every citizen pays their fair share. So that's one of the laws. So, laws protect those utilizing force. Now, they think that all of us are just going around in society doing our thing politely, voluntarily, and civilly, right? They think that is the default state. They just take our society for granted. They think this is the default state. Get rid of the government and it would be this, only better, with nobody violating rights anymore. The government's not violating your rights, they're protecting your rights. Now, if you think they're violating your rights, then talk to your congressman and get a law passed and lower the taxes or whatever, and get the taxes eliminated. Do voluntary taxation. I'm the one that says voluntary taxation. I started out this video with a big spiel about how we could do voluntary taxation. That's mine. You guys are anarchists. You guys are not going to have voluntary taxation. You guys are going to have different thugs forcing their area to give them money, and you're not going to be able to stop them.
And that's some kind of like coercion against you, so there has to be some strictures against them. There's only physical force is the only way that you can violate rights. The contradiction of government is that they establish themselves by force.
You know, come to think of it, they want protection money from, they want to be able to pay protection money to competing police forces, right? And voluntarily too, right? Voluntarily give your money, right? They want everybody to contract with their own protection agency voluntarily. Well, I can picture this society where you're a butcher and you're standing there in your butcher shop and some guys come in to collect your voluntary contribution, and you sure hand over your voluntary contribution, don't you? Voluntarily. You want them to protect your store, right? Now, who are those guys? Who are they? Is it the police who come and they say, seems like your taxes were late, you need to hand us a check or else we're shutting your business down? And you're paying them because they need to pay for their cars and stuff? Is that it? Or is this a mob? Is this like Louis and the boys come in with baseball bats, slapping a baseball bat in their hand? Say, listen there, Fred, looks like you haven't paid up your protection money this month, you know? And so you pay up your protection money. Now, they say, what's the difference? They really can't tell the difference between Soviet Russia, Nazi Germany, and the United States of America. They really can't tell the difference between thugs and a consensual society where we have voted on those laws and we have set the tax rate and we had a right to go to the voting booth and we listened to the arguments made. And if it really mattered to us, we could go down to the voting booth, but only 50% of us go vote. So we have a large amplification left in our voice. We can speak up much louder voting-wise than we currently do. And that's also why we should be free to vote and not required to vote. But anyways, that's a different subject.
Themselves by force. And that is the contradiction. That's not to say that we don't need that we don't need laws, that we don't need a third-party arbiter to settle disputes, honest disputes.
So he says we do need laws, and we do need a third-party arbiter to settle disputes. Is that, or is that not what he said?
Or to protect us against actual crimes, not all the crimes that the governments make up. And like,
what's an actual crime? I say an actual crime is whatever the government says is a crime. Now, what should be a crime is what we would argue about, Victor. An actual crime is simply a statement of fact. I mean, it can be a crime to be a Jew. It was in Nazi Germany. They actually made it a crime to be a Jew. Now, whether that's a legitimate law is what we would argue about, wouldn't we? But what is a crime is just a matter of fact. Now, when you do away with your government, you no longer get to discuss or argue about this. That's just out the window, and you are going to be on to something else. You are not going to be arguing with anybody. It's not going to be arguments in your anarchist society. It's not going to be any debates.
Like I stress here, like I stress, no government has ever established or maintained itself except by the use of force. So it is real.
What point would that speak to, Victor? No government has ever established itself or maintained itself except by use of force. Now, all I have to do is find a government that establishes itself consensually and maintains itself consensually, and you're proven wrong, and that'd be the United States of America. But let's say they all did. Who are you talking to? I am Mr. Cropper. I'm an objectivist. We are in this debate together. I'm discussing my views. You're discussing anarchy. My views are the objectivist idea of governance. I'm not defending every government that ever has been. Now, it just so happens he's wrong. It just so happens he's not correct, that no government has ever consensually been erected. The government of the United States was, and every once in a while a government is, you know. I mean, they vote on, the elected representatives vote, and they make a government. Certainly, Victor, we would have to say ancient Greece obtains. Or, oh, well, they had slaves, and they had women, and only the men could vote, and only men with a certain amount of property, so maybe not.
Contradiction when they purport to be the protectors against force among citizen against citizen.
Hey, just real quick there, Brandon, since you're going to actually be kind of alluding.
Do they arbitrate themselves to the position of a protector against force of citizen between citizen? Well, more than that, they're the arbiter of force of all the laws in the land. It's like these guys get so obsessed with concrete examples about individual things, they can't think of the larger, what it means for the government to have a monopoly on force. They get lost in it. They can only think, well, if I don't pay my taxes, they'll arrest me, and the men that arrest me have guns. That's all they can think.
In your answer anyways, I just want to mention, AJ did a $5 donation. His question was, and I'm pretty much sure your answer to Victor will be more or less along this line. What do you guys think about the social contract? Because that's basically along the lines of what you're going to reference in there. So kind of if you try to incorporate that into your question or in your answer, that'd be great.
All right, so over here he says, what do you guys think about the social contract, $5 donation? And Bennett, who goes by the YouTube handle Canadian Libertarian, Bennett says, I didn't sign anything, AJ, LOL. Okay, so that's his view of it. Now, my view of it is that's just junky thinking. I don't know what. What do I have to do with the social contract? Don't talk about society. I'm not part of a society. I'm an individual. I don't want to talk about any contract with anybody. There's no social for me to contract with. And I'm not part of any social. Okay? I'm an individual. So don't talk to me with that junky thinking. It starts nowhere and goes nowhere. He's as good as the anarchist. It's junky thinking. Now, not to say he didn't have a single point anywhere to make. I'm just saying the social contract is just junk thinking. You know, it's not really either bad or good. Like what is the anarchist stance on taxation? Well, it's junk. Like junk. They don't have any principles at all. And then you come back and you say, well, wait a minute, I thought they were against taxation. Aren't you against taxation? I said, well, yeah, I kind of am, but I'm not with the anarchists on it because they've got junk thinking. And so that's what's going on with the social contract. It's just junk, man. It's just not good stuff. It's just debased stuff. I mean, maybe I should go over the whole thing someday. Maybe I should go. But why? It's going to be like more Kant. Kant's at least worth doing because he's so bad and everyone thinks he's so good. Why am I doing this?
Well, because apparently I think that I'd let Brandon answer that because the consent of the governing.
Yeah. Well, let's let Brandon answer there because it's there anyway.
Yeah.
The social contract is certainly not essential to the objectivist philosophy. We view individual rights as the basis of our philosophy, and people have said that rights don't exist and there isn't any rights anywhere, and that's really technically true. And the way that we defend our rights actually comes down to every single day in real life using trained men with guns and jails and prisons. That's how we defend our rights. There are no floating abstract rights somewhere, and you're never going to get everybody to agree on it or respect them. And even if you did, you would still have honest disagreements among men. So at some point, we're going to have an authority. And if you don't like what the authority is doing, then that is why politics is an important science. Because you should be interested in politics. You should be interested in what kind of a ninny you're voting in up there and what they're doing. And you should have your rights written down on a piece of paper. This comes back again and again and again. I keep coming to these pieces of paper with stuff written on them, and the anarchists are upset that that's all that's between me and anarchy is a piece of paper with stuff written on it, whether it's the Declaration of Independence or any given law. And that is how sophisticated my philosophy and behavior is. I can actually hold together an entire society by agreement based on what's written on the papers. And the few people who disagree, we simply throw into jail.
Oh, there you go, Mr. Cropper dropping a bomb on them, and they gotta deal with that. Now, how are they going to answer that? What are they going to say to that? We just write down on a piece of paper how we're going to operate, and even the men who administer that paper are subject to that paper, right? Even the police officers who administer it go to jail. They do. They go to jail. Police officers go to jail. All right? Politicians. Nixon got whooped out of office because of the law.
Let's get back to basics here. Do you want to say something, Bennett?
Well, I just wanted to point out, just because, just to throw a little monkey wrench in this whole equation here, I guess, based on what Brandon was saying, is I could say at 48 years old, I've had social and civil conflicts, people both in the physical realm and in just as far as economic terms, like transactions or the other side of the contract wasn't proper. I've never used the police, the courts, or any judges to arbitrate my disputes, and most of the
So he says, I live in a society surrounded by police, courts, and judges, but I've never used them myself. Therefore what, Bennett? Idiot. Therefore you don't need them? Try living in a society without them, where you couldn't call them even if you needed them. Try living in that kind of a society.
I've actually done a much better job of actually arbitrating those disputes by making sure that I was wise enough to make sure that I placed myself in a position that person, if they decided to screw me over, let's say it was an economic transaction, for that one time, they recognized there was an inherent probability that...
This is a scary thing about anarchy. It's just going to be between you and whoever you're dealing with. You guys have to just deal with each other on a voluntary basis, one-to-one, right? It's just individuals. There's no state authority over you. This is what's really frightening about anarchy, because the individual you're dealing with may or may not do it so in good faith and so on. But most importantly, I think, is that when that individual gets violated by the other individual, it's not just between those two and whoever they've agreed with in their surroundings, whoever they've paid, whoever their friends and neighbors are. That's what he's saying here. He's saying my friends and my neighbors and all of us, and we count on each other. Well, the nice thing about government is that individual, whoever it is, they got a poor little old lady that got robbed or whatever, now has the resources of the gargantuan Leviathan behind her, right? And more than that, too, like, not just behind her, but they'll, like, step out in front of her. Like if the state wants to prosecute a criminal, it doesn't really matter what the individual, if the individual's dead, you know, what are they going to do about murder laws? Like, who avenges dead people? The state. What are they going to do in anarchy? I've never asked that question about them before. I want to put that to you, anarchists. What are you going to do about murder? Who avenges dead people? You stupid sons of bitches.
You're going to cause them more economic harm and pain down the road. So, like I said, I didn't have to use the government or even this pretense of the...
Well, I'm glad the government's there in case you and your sloppy thinking decide that you're going to come do something to me, and you think that you're going to voluntarily interact with me, and I don't agree with your definition of voluntary. I'm glad that I have a group of professional, armed soldiers, thugs, whatever you want to call them, to come and arrest you and bring you to justice. Because sloppy thinkers like this are what would be dangerous in anarchy. People who come and say, God spoke to me, so now you have to pay me tithes for my church, or whatever. Who knows what kind of nonsense would come up overnight, before the night was even through.
Court systems to arbitrate a dispute. I don't believe that is actually the only, which is why I don't believe in the monopoly of the use of force violence in terms of government as the final arbiter or means to dispute conflicts, whether it's in the social realm or in the economic realm. I just want to point that out because it can be done without it. Because
he said blah, 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 which is why I don't believe in the monopoly of force. You didn't lead up to that. You didn't lead up to that, Bennett. Go through it again. You did not. You said, which is why. And there was nothing before that. That came out of the blue.
48 years, I've never done so myself. And like I say, I have arbitrated disputes.
I would clarify, it's not the final arbiter of force, it's the only arbiter of force.
He says he himself has arbitrated disputes. Therefore what?
And if you wanted to say the final arbiter of force, that would be the individual. Because if someone breaks into my house, they are going to get stabbed or shot. So I am the final arbiter of force, if you wanted to say it that way. But the government is the only arbiter of force. Nobody gets to use force except the government. And that's...
Are you talking about the initiatory force to establish and maintain itself? Is that what you're defending?
I'm also talking about...
Now, why does the government have to initiate force to establish it? And if it could establish itself without initiating force, would that be okay? Did the United States government initiate force by declaring a revolution against the initiation of force that was coming from Britain? Like, how pretzel is their thinking on this? Can they ever get to a foundation where somebody said, I have a right to my life and I'm going to rebel right now? Because that has happened. Like, can you guys think about this? Can you realize it's happened?
Military force outside of emergencies, right? I mean, if somebody burns your house down while you're on vacation, you don't go over to their house and burn theirs down, or else you're going to go to jail too, right? You call the police and let the police deal with it. So,
now, how is Bennett going to answer that? That's a pretty solid argument. You don't go burn down an arsonist's house, you call the police, and the police go get him. And the police are more than you. The police are more than you. Even if you have 10 friends, the police are more than you. Even if you have 50 friends, the police are more than you. The police will go get him. Now you say the police didn't, it's a corrupt society. Well, you probably live in London, where they're letting Muslims rape people.
It's an emergency where you have to defend yourself with force. The government is the institution that uses physical force, period, full stop.
I'm sorry, Victor, I just got to respond.
Okay.
Actually, just from my own personal life, rather than relying on the government, someone that's, I don't know, especially growing up in the Brunswick.
In my own personal life, what kind of principle are you pointing out? What principle is he pointing out?
So like a half hour away, I relied on the fact that my neighbors and everyone that knew me weren't worried about the cops showing up. They were worried about, actually, they were probably more worried about that if they burn my house down, oh, fuck yeah, then it's going to burn yours. So actually, I think that was much more of a...
He's pointing out the principle of retribution. He wants a society of retribution where people are afraid lest somebody else do something back to them. Well, there's an easy answer to that, Bennett, you stupid moron. Just find somebody that can't retaliate. Or do like Machiavelli said, and make sure that when you smite them, it's hard enough that they can't retaliate. Right? Smite them hard enough that they can't fight back. So I've got an easy answer for your dilemma of, well, what if people did something? Oh, somebody would do something back. Well, what if they did something really bad and it like finalized somebody, like murder? Back to murder.
To be honest with you, then the cops taking me to court, and who knows how that came to. But like I say, my ability to defend myself and having that inherent right that is not afforded or afforded me by government, just by sheer fact that I consider myself a free human being.
See, back to the idea that rights are philosophical. They're not. Rights are justified philosophically. Rights are actually enforced in the real world with guns and bullets and men with guns and bullets and cars and jails and police and courts. That's how we actually enforce it. Now, he thinks that the philosophical justification of rights is sufficient. It's not. Criminals don't give a damn about that, dude. They don't care about that.
That was a pretty good deterrent, and it has been a really good deterrent over the course of my entire life, is my willingness and my ability to, if you screw with me, I'm coming back. I think that's way more of a deterrent than, like, say,
Laws are how we all get out of feeling guilty about our retribution against criminals. There are different groups in this argument, right? He wants us to all be on the same side, humans, right? But the humans are going to splinter up, and one of the groups is going to be people that want to hurt people, and the other group is going to be everybody that wants to go about their merry way. And those are going to be your two groups. And you guys, now with the state, makes it so that there are two groups. There's the state, and then there are the criminals, right? And we in society go around our daily business, and we don't get involved in what the state does for the most part, unless we're drunk driving or something. Mostly the state stays out of our business. The state usually only involves itself with the criminals. And in an objectivist society, here's the thing. I should be talking about what an objectivist society would look like and what the laws would be. But I don't even have to go that far to defeat these guys as nonsense. All I have to do is defend, I can even defend communist Russia sometimes and defeat them. But defense of the United States of America is sufficient to defeat their arguments. I don't even have to talk about a fully consensual society with voluntary taxation. And maybe there's a point in that, because Ayn Rand said she wasn't concerned about voluntary taxation in the immediate future. She said it's a problem for the distant future. It's not something that we need to worry about. And I think she probably thought that because we have a facsimile of voluntary taxation in the fact that we elect our representatives and they set the taxes, and the taxes can go up and down. So she didn't view them as set in stone. And she saw them drop drastically in her lifetime. In the 1930s, they were very high. In the 1940s, they came down drastically. So she knew that taxes can go up and down, both.
That's the case for you, but there are other individuals who aren't so strong. And so in the world that you're speaking of, these individuals would become the victims. And who would defend them? If some poor little old lady or something.
You see, and now we've gone full circle. If you retain my opening speech here is just like, here we have like, who's going to determine this, who's going to determine that, blah, 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 blah. This is where Hobbesian subjectivists in the political realm, where the objectivists come out. This is where Hobbesian man, the Hobbesian sense of life when it comes to law.
Who have I said would determine it? Who have I said would determine it? Look,
you just said that we need the government as and not competing defense agencies. You just need one monolithic monopoly on the provision of arbitration.
Who have I said would write those laws? Who have I said would write those laws?
Sorry,
we will write those laws. We will write those laws. And if we don't write those laws,
very, very good. Let's get back to basics then. That's very good. When justice was provided by non-state customary law, that's the we that we're talking about here. It was a non-coercive, quick, efficient, and cheap. What?
Okay, when justice was provided by some system of law, I don't know what period of history he's talking about. Probably medieval period or something like that, or something. I don't know what period he's talking about, but Here's my question to you, Victor. Why do you get to hearken to that period of history and I can't hearken to the Constitution of the United States? As my example. As the example of we wrote the laws and we write the laws. And we assent to the laws. In the United States of America, we assent to our laws. And if we don't assent to them, we change them. And we're legalizing marijuana all across the nation. I probably should have mentioned that as a good example of laws changing. You know, and it shouldn't have been illegal to begin with. Right? Why was it illegal? Power of taxation. Ooh. Okay. No, taxation's not legitimate. We should have voluntary taxation. Don't let your anarchist brain get distracted on that.
States arose and imposed government-made laws on their own people and other societies. Justice became unavailable, coercive, slow, inefficient, costly, and awfully unjustly brutal. Besides, I think all of history shows this, for Christ's sakes, under all of these governments. You might very well say that the purpose of government.
So I don't know what system he was talking about, but his point will not stand if he will talk about the United States Constitution.
For the protection of individual rights. It's kind of like a hard-pressed point to make on when you think of communism or Nazism, or just ruling for the sake of ruling's sake. It's just a matter of like a power lust. None of these societies had even defined the conception of individual rights.
See, I don't know why he's going on about Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia. Where have I defended that? How would I defend that? What?
The monarchs and the kings and all the dictatorship of the 20th century.
Yeah. There's nobody defending that position, Victor. I'm not defending that position. You're wasting your breath.
But you're justifying. But you just said you agree that you would rather live in a communist dictatorship than an anarchist society. An anarchist society.
Does that mean I'm defending communism, or does that just mean that anarchism is so bad that I would rather live under the Soviets?
Not one where you just make it up as you go along.
All right.
You can't define what justice is.
Let me put it this way. When you break the law, you don't just have your enemy that you damaged, like our host here was just saying. You have the full force of a massive gang of armed thugs that are now after you when you break the law. That's why we like the government, okay? We don't want criminals to be answering to just us. We want criminals to be answering to a ruthless gang of thugs who do not stop. The long arm of the law is what we say about it, right? It just keeps going, and when one prosecutor quits, some other prosecutor will be hired in his place, and it just keeps going. It's relentless. That's why we like the law, because it takes the whole enormous infrastructure.
Now, sometimes the law is not enforced. Look at what happened in Rotterdam in England, right? The law wasn't enforced. People were raping children, and nothing was done because they had brown skin, right? Find the people who didn't enforce that law and put them in jail, and then put all those brown skin people in jail too.
Against the law.
Every single criminal, one individual criminal does one individual act, and he gets the entire state thrown at it. That's why we like the law.
I'm not arguing against the law.
You're not arguing for it unless you're severely confused.
Look, I'm saying that there should be a codified system of laws.
He's not arguing against the law. He's an anarchist. He's arguing for the law.
Procedures of what constitutes.
Who would enforce them?
The people. The people. There should be. Yeah, yeah.
Do the people enforce the laws of the United States of America? I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen. Do we enforce our laws? Let me give you an example. A tractor trailer, a semi, turned over out on a gravel road. And the police came, and they were cleaning it up, and the tow truck came, and there was this fuel spilled. Now, the fuel was dyed red, which meant that road taxes had not been paid on that fuel. It was supposed to be burned only in tractors. There's a red dye in it. And the cops can stop any truck on the road, dip their thing in there and check, and make sure there's no red dye in your tank. If there's red dye in your tank, that means you're using fuel that has not been taxed, because the farmers get tax-free fuel or lower tax fuel. Now, what did the sheriff do about that? Because the farmer was a little bit worried. He said, it's about all this fuel, we don't need to, what's going on? You know, he just tried to bring it up. He just tried to mention it. He was scared. He was worried because it's tens of thousands of dollars fine. And he probably mentioned it as the fuel spill. You know, what about this fuel spilled around EPA, whatever. Who knows how he mentioned it. But he brings this up. And the cop says to him, oh, that's a federal law. If they want to send some Fed out here to enforce that law, they can send him out here. Okay? So I want you to know, Victor, in the United States of America, it is the people that enforce the law. That is a small-scale rebellion. That is civil disobedience happening inside law enforcement. So we obey the laws that we want to, we enforce the laws that we believe we should, and we change the laws constantly. Every day we have people all across this land working on undoing laws, redoing laws, and making new laws all the time.
The sense that there should not be one monolithic agency that maintains and sustains itself through the use of physical force. Let me ask:
does the United States government maintain itself through the use of physical force, or does it do so by preventing anybody from establishing the use of physical force, which is the way us people inside the nation would have it? We do not want Antifa to grow in power. We want somebody to go crush them to preserve our way of life, right? Do you want Antifa to take over Oregon, and then Washington, and then California? Do you want it to be run by Antifa? The Republicans will flee for fear of their lives. Wait, that has happened. The Republicans have fled Oregon. No, they're not for fear of their lives, but just because if they were inside the state, legally that was defined as they could be part of a vote or something like that. And so by leaving the bounds of the state, then they couldn't be part of the legislative, and then they don't assent to whatever the legislator does. So, and the legislature was trying to pass laws the Republicans didn't want to pass, and so okay, you guys go look it up.
I can do that. Why does it have to maintain itself through the use of physical force?
Let's get into it without over talking one another. Okay, how is this monopoly on the use of force, this government, how is it to maintain itself? How is it to earn its keep, so to speak?
Well, I would say it should do so by voluntary taxation, and we have a proxy of that in the United States because we do control our taxes through our elected officials.
Okay, now what? Okay, voluntary taxation?
Yes, that's
Voluntary taxation? What's that? That's what I'm trying to debate with you about, Victor Pross. I'm an objectivist, and I'm trying to talk about Ayn Rand's philosophy. And one of the things in her philosophy, this guy who keeps saying he knows about objectivism and left the objectivist movement and used to be an objectivist, one of the things in her philosophy is voluntary taxation. All right? It's just one of the things, all right? Now, what are we going to call it? If you want to call it tithes, government tithes. There. I'll quit using voluntary taxation. I'll call it government tithes. Now then, this video is getting long, so we have to say goodbye, and we will continue.